Welcome back to the People of Web3 podcast. I'm your host, Frank, and with me, the co-host, Blaine. And today we have a very special guest, Guile, whom I've met in Vancouver a couple months ago during NFT BC. Hello, Guile, how are you doing?
Pretty good. Excited to chat with you guys. Do a
Awesome.
recap of a little bit of the stuff we chat during NFTBC.
Yeah. So just a quick intro for those of you who don't know. Guile is the artist, creative director, and co-creator of CryptoKitties. And of course, within these times after the launch, he has done a lot more. And we're gonna dive into that a little bit because yeah, some very interesting art projects you're also doing. So maybe a quick intro from you, Guile, tell people a bit about what you do, and what you're working on now.
Yeah, so in the past few years, I kind of divide my time in two major things. Still doing like consulting and like career direction project. Service for different projects in Web3. And part of my time, I'm exploring some ways to get closer to science, doing some art project related to blockchain and science. And yeah, trying to find the balance between those two type of works.
Cool. So I definitely want to jump into like the art part later. But for now, because I know some people have uh heard of, I think everyone have heard of CryptoKitties. It's one of the OG collections, generative art. Just I think everybody should know a bit more. And I would like to have you share a bit of, insights on how you guys started it, why you guys started it, and how's that going?
Yeah, I love telling that story. It was a really good time for me, I think, like personally and professionally. But the way it goes is just to give some context. Before working on CryptoKitties and any blockchain related project, I was working at this company called X and Zen, which was a startup here based in Vancouver. And the company mantra was a startup that built a startup. So the idea was to look at different emerging technologies and see what kind of project or idea can we build around those technologies. So during my 2 years there, we did a little bit of everything. Um, we did some AR and VR projects. We did iOS games. I love mentioning that, but we did a dating app that you can only use emojis to communicate with your matches. I don't know if I shared that with you guys, but yeah, we did a bunch of different like experimental projects, usually like a 3 month timeline to develop kind of an MVP of an idea, put it out in the world and see how it goes, how it react, and on that like pacing of doing like different experimental projects. That was 2017, I think. In the tech director of the company is called Dieter, and he was already super interested in blockchain. And he was looking at the Ethereum network and really excited about the possibilities of having like smart contracts and stuff built on top of Ethereum. But the thing that he noticed is that the only protocol was like a fungible token protocol, and he was analyzing that most of the stuff that we own on our life is most of them are, or the majority of it are actually non-fungible. And he decided to write this new protocol called ERC-721. That's the standard for the NFT. So he's the actual NFT
Oh,
papa.
really?
So
This
yeah,
was one of your team members, the tech lead.
yeah. Um,
Ah, that's
doing
interesting fact. That's cool.
yeah. So he approached. I remember he approached the company and was like, "Hey, I'm doing this thing. We should do an experiment with this technology." And the story goes pretty much like that. Where there's this creative director at the time called Mac, this really creative, amazing person, and we were like trying to figure out what to do and what kind of project we could build around this ERC 721. We weren't even calling it an NFT at the time, I guess. We didn't have this word at the time. And Max said something along the lines of like, the internet is ruled by cats, so we should put cats on the blockchain. And then it was kind of a silence for a while. Like, well, what does that even mean? And that was kind of the starting point of like developing CryptoKitties. And I don't know if I should give like a context a little bit of what CryptoKitty is.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah. So yeah, it's the first. I mean, it's always a little bit like polemic if you say the first on anything on Web3, but the first NFT project, the first that really brought to life NFTs. Like there was, as I mentioned, there wasn't the word NFT before CryptoKitties. It really, with the creation of this standard and with the popularity of CryptoKitties, that's what kind of brought to life NFTs. And obviously there was other projects before that really inspired CryptoKitties. They're like doing ways of making non-fungible assets like CryptoPunks, and all the way back to like Kevin McCoy doing art related blockchain experiments on that regard. But the project that we developed, for those who are not familiar, is I usually call them in different ways. I'd like to call it like an interactive experience, like a generative art project, or simply a digital game, a collectible experience. So for those who are not familiar, CryptoKitties is this game that you collect different digital cats, and each cat has their own unique DNA. And obviously, each cat is a token, is an NFT. And the interactivity of the project that you can breed the cats together, so you can create a new offspring and create some interesting dynamics and mechanics within this ecosystem of like people that became breeders, people that became that breed the really nice cats and then put them in the market for people to breed with their cats, pretty much becoming like a pimp on the game of like putting the cats on the streets, and like people like pay to breed with their cats. And one of the mechanics of the game was really like exploration, kind of like a sandbox mechanic of like just trying to create the cat that you want. Because like in real life, when you meet two cats, some characteristics will come from the mother, some will come from the father. And we also added this idea of mutations, or meowtations, how we used to call in the game. That'll introduce a new trait, maybe a new eye, a new color, a new fur pattern. And the kind of the very interesting stuff that people had a lot of fun doing it. On the game we had this cats called fancy cats that you can think as like the golden card of collectible experience, where we will give some kind of a riddle or like a puzzle for the community to try to figure out what cats they need to breed, what genes they need to mix. And when they do the right mixing, they will get, instead of a normal cat, the generative art cat, they would get this special cat that was actually drawn by hand, each edition or each variation of it. And it was really fun, especially for me, to just create those different cats, because I mean, we would just go wild. We'll like sometimes we get some like different events or like things that we wanted to talk about, and we just do like a fancy cat related to Women's Day, or a fancy cat related to science, or just go nuts and just like do a fancy cat, like half pizza, half cat. Or we did one for Canada, like a half poutine and half cat.
Nice. How many fancy cats are there in total?
Oh, that's a good question. I would guess that we probably have like about, oh, I really don't want to say the wrong number, but I would guess like close to 100 at this point.
Okay, so not too many.
Yeah.
It's still very rare. Yeah, very rare. Considering how many of these CryptoKitties out there. How many are there out there right now?
A little bit over 2 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So 100 out
But
of
on
the
the
2
fancy
million.
cat, so we have like different variations, but depending on the fancy cat, they might have like a breeding cap. So there are some fancy cats that are still open to breed. You can still get one if you breed. So I have like thousands and thousands of possibilities to breed that cat, but some they're closed already. So there's some that have only like 30 of that fancy cat.
Interesting. I'd love to pick your brain about, obviously considering this as like a one of the pioneering NFT projects. When you guys were putting this together, what were your expectations once you released it? Did you have any expectations of what you thought would happen, and what were some of the surprises once things played out?
Well, I think I'll say for myself, but the general like vibe that I remember when we were building the project was trading very similar to the other experiments that we did. And for many experiments that we did before CryptoKitties, most of them they fail. So we're kind of used to the idea that like it might fail, but we will learn stuff from it, and we learn through developing this. Um, so I think I mean, this whole area is very unpredictable and very surprising when people try to pretend they know what's going on. Like no one really knows what's going on.
Even now,
no one knows.
like
Yeah.
6 years on, it's still surprising, and still no one really knows what's going on.
Yeah, I remember the big thing that was happening at the time was that was a little bit before the ICOs, and that was a lot of like different opinions, and there's a lot of like weird stuff happening during that time, which I didn't follow directly because I actually learned about blockchain through the developing of CryptoKitties. But I would say the expectation were like, oh, we were like pretty happy while we were building. And I think we did like, I think slowly we noticed that it was like there was something there. Um, I think the first thing was we did a internal playtest, and people barely worked that day because they were actually like in playing the game and breeding the cats. I think that was one indication of like even like aside from the technology using NFTs, it was just fun to breed the cats and see what you're gonna get. And then I think was, if I'm not mistaken, I think was October or September of 2017. The team went to Eat Waterloo, this hackathon in Canada. It was like the biggest, the Ethereum hackathons. And I think after that event, we really felt like, okay, people actually really enjoy playing the game, because like a lot of people during the hackathon was what they were really interesting, and they're just like use a lot of their time instead of like hacking. They ended up just like playing CryptoKitties.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at that time, it was still like, it wasn't, the UI wasn't really there. Just part of the traits were done. Um, so yeah, I think it was those two was like some points that was like, oh, there's like some fun into the project we were building. But I would say like no one really expected to become what actually became at the end. Like how big was the boom after we launched?
Yeah.
And
I think,
historic and
yeah. Sorry, I butted in there. I just had a quick one when you were talking about the developers getting preoccupied with the breeding of cats. It kind of brings up a kind of an interesting idea in this space where, like, if you're creating an NFT, like a art collection, CryptoKitties, or just art in general on the blockchain, it's without if you're interested in tech or not, it intersects technology. And so if there's some sort of a boom, if your art kind of goes viral, you get the people that may not necessarily be into art originally being into it because of the fact that it's built on this technology. So yeah, I find that quite interesting. It's you're kind of built this blockchain, this technology is kind of the canvas for all these different things that we create. And you can get these devs who previously may not have been interested in art or anything kind of in that scene, drop what they're doing and start breeding cats just because of the fact that it's building on this technology that they're familiar with. Like I find that kind of cool. Like it's this new canvas that we can play around with, and this new canvas has these other people who are interested in it as well, the devs.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that one of the probably most interesting stuff that I'm really proud of CryptoKitties was actually like the amount of people that were actually introduced to blockchain through CryptoKitties. Because before they might not be interested in like, I mean, they might have heard about Bitcoin or something here and there, but like CryptoKitty was actually the entry point for so many people to like learn about the technology as they play, as they learn about what is what is a gas fee, what is a digital wallet, and I think that was really kind of a really interesting achievement of CryptoKitties. Like through this like mechanic, we actually brought people to this technology or like to learn about the concepts and what was possible. And even like a lot of the early collectors and early players of CryptoKitties, they actually ended up becoming quite influential in this industry. You know, opening their own companies or doing projects later on that were quite successful. So yeah, it's interesting to see how that project helped people to just connect and learn about this technology.
Fun fact, one of our previous guests, he told us that his first NFT was CryptoKitties.
Oh, nice.
I didn't even know that. I'm friends with him like Nazca. I was friends with him for like almost a year now. I didn't even know his first NFT was CryptoKitties, but that was very cool. And I told him, oh, we're gonna have another guest coming up from CryptoKitties, so he's gonna be excited to hear about this.
Yeah.
I want to connect with him after just to
Oh
hear
yeah.
more about like which kitty he has or if he has a favorite. I love asking people if they have a favorite kitty.
Hmm. Oh, I was looking before. I like the dragon trait a lot, but I'll definitely connect him. He's also, as you said, like because they got in so early with CryptoKitties, they are, some of the first ones in the NFT space. And he was since then he was became like a collab manager for different NFT projects. He's still very active now, and he does a bit of consulting, and he offers like trainings to traditional corporations to onboard them to Web3 and stuff. So I can see like what the rest of your community does because they are in so early. They're probably a lot of them are doing something amazing now. Very cool.
You're talking about the onboarding. That's something I'm quite interested in is the bridging between, Web 2, Web 3. How do we kind of onboard these people into this world that we kind of believe in a lot of different ways? It's not all great. I think we touched on that in our chat a few weeks ago as, Web3 isn't a perfect environment. But the role of art and NFTs in that onboarding process, how do you think about that? If a CryptoKit, like a version of CryptoKitties was launched today, what do you think it would still have? Like, do all NFT collections play that role, or was it mainly because it was one of the first ones? Like, how do we, what role do NFT creators play or artists play in that onboarding challenge? Like, what things should they be thinking about, if that makes sense? Like, is it something that they should be thinking about, or just kind of happens organically? If it just happens, you can't really plan for it.
Yeah, I feel like maybe I can think about two ways. Like maybe one is just doing different projects that might be appealing for different people. Might not everybody be love cats or cartoon cats or
Crypto
uh,
doggies.
yeah, or just like yeah, the what kind of experience you're providing with whatever you're building, or if it's an art piece, or can touch different audiences. But I feel like yeah, the less we had to use the word NFT, the most interesting the project is for onboarding people, right? Because then you first delivering something that people want to participate or want to be involved, regardless if it's blockchain, if it's NFT or not. Um, so I think that's how I feel about like CryptoKitties when I mentioned like people playing it in internal, like it wasn't just a playtest, but people would still have fun playing it. So I think if you're delivering a good experience, regardless if you're thinking about the technology, people will like to, be on board or like be used or be connected to whatever you're building. If it's providing like a positive or, fun or good experience.
Mm. So I guess in the early days when you guys were spreading the word about CryptoKitties, you were more focused on just telling people, hey, there's this game that you can play to make different sort of cats, but you're not telling people, hey, this is this one of the first NFT game, blockchain game, right?
Yeah, because like like today is a little bit easier when you say NFT, right? But at the time, when you say an NFT, it was
Yeah.
like only the people very niche in the community would actually know what you're talking about. Uh, so it's more like the process of like explaining why is that different. Like, is that's just a website that you breed digital cats, and then explain kind of the possibilities and like the why blockchain is different than like Web 2 if you build that on Web 2. Which even like personally for me it took a few months to actually like first understand why it was such an interesting concept. To and then to be able to maybe learn a little bit how to better explain to people they're not familiar with. Um,
Yeah,
which I think even today I think we might struggle a little bit. I think to communicate that.
100%.
I think. Okay, so I want to talk about your project that you mentioned last time with the tulip. Can you share with our audience what this project is about? I know it's a combination of your two main passions since childhood, which is science and art. And with this project kind of combining the two, can you share with us about this project and how is it going? What can we expect in the upcoming months? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very excited to share because you know it's been progressing slowly but progressing, which is really exciting. And as you mentioned, yeah, it's probably I would say the first project that I'm really combining those two things that I love in life. So it's just been a pleasure to actually like work on this thing. Um, but yeah, to give some context, I last year I participated in this program from MIT Media Lab called How to Grow Almost Anything. It's a wonderful, wonderful course to introduce people to synthetic biology. I knew very little at the time, but I was quite curious to learn a little bit more about this new kind of a new field in biology. And it's a very interesting class in terms of like they really motivate people like outside biology to participate on the class and then learn about this field. Like we have a bunch of like architects, designers, artists, engineers, software developers, a little bit of everything on that class. And it was a hybrid class, so I had like the physical one and the people following online. And by the end of it, there was like one semester, about like I think 4 months. And by the end of it, everybody had to present a final project idea. And I obviously like have been thinking a lot about blockchain the past few years, and I was trying to find an interesting project to combine what I have just learned about synthetic biology. And I was really, really interested about like how quite recently we can encode information into DNA in a much more like cheap way than it used to be quite expensive to um, convert any small data into DNA. So I was looking in different ways to connect NFTs, blockchain, and synthetic biology, and then I stumbled upon like tulips a couple of years ago and how interesting is like tulip as I mean as a flower, but also like how it have played different roles and have different interesting aspects in our society. And then, well, I mentioned the last time we chat, but the major thing was this event called the Tulip Mania. That for those who are not familiar was during the 1700 in Netherlands. There was this frenzy about these broken tulips that have like a special pattern on it, and there was a lot of spare income on the wealthy class in the Dutch society at the time, and this frenzy became like quite out of control, where people were paying more and more for those bulbul tulips, going like different auctions, to a point that one bulbul tulip was sold for the same price of a house in Amsterdam canals at the time, which is probably a couple million years today's money. And that term tulip mania became a jargon on finance where people describe different like financial bubbles. And obviously, in the past 2 years or so, there's a lot of articles from different news outlets comparing NFTs with tulip mania and doing that parallel between those two events of like the digital art and the stuff that's been happening with NFTs in the past 2 years. So I'm working in a way to really connect those two. So the way I'm working on this project is making a collection of NFTs, and the way we're building those, they are like generative art animations or generative animation based on the tulip DNA. I partnered with this company in the Netherlands that they were the first company to sequence the entire genome of a tulip. And I love to point that fact that in 2017 was the longest genome ever sequenced in human history. They had just kind of another company had recently developed this new tool that made sequencing DNA much easier, or faster, and they sequenced this gigantic genome that actually, like, the tulip has like the tulip genome is like 11 times bigger than the human genome, which is quite surprising and a mystery and just an interesting fact about about the cosmos, I guess. And so we're using this data to generate those animations, and we're doing one animation that would be like the most special item in the collection. And we are putting that in a wallet, and then we are picking the access to the wallet, converting into a synthetic DNA that you can do in the lab, and then injecting back into a tulip. So we're actually connecting a living tulip to the NFT that's on the wallet. And we want to connect like the digital and the physical, the real tulip with the synthetic DNA, with the animation that's actually designed or generated by the data on the DNA of the tulip to make a little cycle. So really like connecting the two things to kind of generate this interesting dialogue about like tulip mania, NFTs, the synthetic biology. That's like it's quite amazing, and that's kind of the gist of the project. Been working on it for over a year now, and it's kind of the last update I can give. We've been working on the data of the DNA, which it's been, I don't know if I mentioned last time with chat, but I received this text file of 22 gigabytes.
It's like, is this
Gigabytes.
an error?
which
That's
is funny
crazy.
how, like, when they mention how big it was, it's like, yeah, it's big, but I don't really understand how big it is when you say, like, 11 billion base pairs. Like, I don't know what that means, but when you receive the file and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, I can feel it, how gigantic it is.
It translates into a, like, in numbers that we can make sense of. Oh, gigabytes. Oh, it's 24. Oh, that's massive.
Yeah.
I understand now. Yeah. Wow.
What's
That's
what's the
cool.
file like? Like, what file type is it? And when you open it, what what do you see?
It's actually
Text
like
file?
a dot. Yeah,
Oh,
it's a text file, the text X, TXT. Yeah.
And so what's just a
okay. So
string of like numbers and letters?
Yeah, it's we converted a little bit from like the actual like ATGC from the DNA. So, and this one is just numbers
Okay.
representing like pieces of the nucleotides ATGC.
Okay, so the DNA, that's C, G, A, and T. Are those the the makeup of the DNA? I'm Googling it. I'm not a
Yeah,
I say
yeah.
cetosine, guanine, adenine, and thymine. Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know what
that's
that
everything
means,
you
but
have.
yeah.
I just like when you see those like images of the double helix of the DNA, you have those little things like the steps on the
mhm.
stair.
Yeah.
It's like those two things. So is it A and T or is it G and C? And they just like change orders.
The fact that we can, decode life and kind of represent that in, a text file is kind of mind-blowing. But the fact that you can also code, like edit the DNA as well is like even like next level crazy. It's hard to like it's crazy. Obviously you're creating a project where there's an interplay between the real and the digital, and there's some kind of connection there. Fast forward 10 years, it'll be interesting to see what those sorts of what things we can create where the online is speaking to the physical, and what that means, and from an artist perspective, from a heaps of different perspectives. It's kind of like mind-blowing and a bit scary, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Yeah, no, when I was like on that class, I feel like that's amazing, but also like super scary. Like, as you mentioned, like it almost feels like we're not meant to know all that stuff. Like our eyes cannot see. Like we look at your hand and you just see
Yeah,
your skin, right? And then we
like the source
understand that it's
code.
like, yeah. And now we can, yeah, as you mentioned, we can read the code and we can also write the code now. And I mean, we don't fully understand how to write everything to for the machine to work, the biological machine to work the way we want. Not for
Mm.
everything yet, but I guess like eventually we'll have more and more control of like programming stuff for the cells to do whatever we want.
One I'm going to say something kind of a bit weird and probably out there, but it just came to mind, so I just want to quickly say it. One thing I was thinking about the last probably week was I grew up religious, and then like I kind of like went away from my faith, and I guess I was at the time considered myself an atheist. But with all these advancements in technology, I'm kind of like, it's hard for me to be an atheist when like we're unpacking so much of what life is, and we're seeing these different metaverses, these different sorts of like games that can be created through humans, and considering all our limitations, even though we're really smart, but we're limited, but yet we can create these experiences that seem to mimic like life in a lot of different ways. Makes me think, are we in this, like the whole idea around a simulation doesn't seem so crazy after you look at all these sorts of things, is what I'm kind of saying. Like all these different it's hard to be atheist when you kind of look around. You're like, we're getting so close at creating a universe just as these mere apes. Like it's not a stretch to think that some game has created the thing that we're living in at the moment. Bit of a from CryptoKitties to religion, but when you're talking about this text file of this tulip kind of DNA, whatever you called it just made me think about that. Crazy.
Yeah, maybe our gods are software engineers.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. Maybe Mark Zuckerberg's going to be will be a god in the future. I don't know if I'd want to live in that universe with all the ads everywhere, but makes you think.
Yeah, I hope that doesn't become true.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry
It is
about that
this.
detour.
No, I recently saw a Black Mirror episode as well that talks about different layers of reality. And then the whole time that we thought the main character is in the reality, and then she's watching this TV series being made by CGI using her life. But then in the end, it finds out like she is actually the layer two, and there was a layer one. So she's
I saw this funny meme the other day. It was like, imagine, so you look at nighttime, you look at the sky, you see the stars, but the meme was like, imagine if they're not stars, but they're just holes in a container so that we can breathe. This is like, it's kind of like Lion King with like the balls of gas. They're like, don't be crazy, they're not balls of gas.
anyways, I think that's pretty good for the podcast. I covered what I want to cover. Is there anything else you want to add, Blaine or Guile, you want to share with us? Maybe there's something that we don't know.
I want to ask you guys stuff. Can I ask stuff?
Of
course.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Role
I mean, I
reversal.
think we talked a little bit about like last time, but I was curious if there's any updates on what you guys are working or what you guys are, yeah, just
Okay.
thoughts about the space and why you guys are interesting right now.
So maybe on my side, so not a not a lot of updates since the last time we spoke. Still working at Empower. kind of working on putting this podcast together. I think the first episode we're hoping to go out this week. Probably not a lot of updates since the last time. What about you, Frank?
I would say same projects, but more progress, I would say. So with I think last time when we talked, I haven't had the group Muse Hive yet, the group that we do exhibitions. We do art exhibitions focusing on digital art. So we do mainly NFT art, but we're also inclusive of traditional artists where the event makes sense to include traditional artists, because at the end of the day, we want to allow leverage art and use it as a bridge to allow Web2 people to come to Web3. And I think art is a great way to get them on board and at least exposed to what NFTs and blockchains are, that is digestible and just more interesting than too much tech stuff and numbers. So yeah, so we're planning right now 2 exhibitions in Bali, potentially 3. And then we're also doing one in Tokyo in September, potentially helping one in Copenhagen in September. Yeah, and then next year in Bangkok. So I think that's going well. I already told Carmilla about it, and the co-founder of NFT BC, she's one of our first guests. And I told her, when we do these exhibitions around the world, I would like to involve artists from Vancouver and from the NFT BC community as well. So when opportunities come up, and she'll probably let the community know as well. Because I met a lot of amazing artists in Vancouver. Yeah, it'd be really cool to connect, you guys to other cities and vice versa in the future. Maybe next year we'll do something in Canada that brings, artists from Asia and other parts of Europe to there as well. So I think progress, still kind of early stage, but the network that we're building here with people Web3 is also growing, having more guests coming up. And this is only, I think, first phase of what we're trying to build is the podcast and doing content and bringing these contacts together. And then afterwards is how do we use this network to help people in our community and in the network and help connect people. Yeah, so that's something for later this year or maybe even next year. But for now, thank you so much for trusting us and,
One quick question. Sorry, one quick question. Sorry, that's right. We're being organic. I don't know if we've got a lot of time, but my background's in architecture. And one thing I find is in that circle, there's a lot of, stigma around Web3, blockchain, NFTs. Do you find the same within the general creative scene where you are from? There's this kind of divide where, like in architecture, I see a lot of hate. Like one of my friends who's in the space, he's also an architect, and he posted in a forum one of his generative NFT collections. And that forum was just like literally hating on my mate. And I'm just like,
what are they hating on though?
Well, they just think it's a massive scam, the whole thing. So yeah, I was just curious within the general creative industry that you're surrounded by, what's the sentiment around them and Web3? The more open to it, or what do you find?
Like the industry that was like really close before, like working more on tech and startup world. Like I worked for a couple of years in like motion design industry, and it was interesting to see when that happened, that whole industry, like the majority of people were just super happy and interested about what was going on. Cause I mean, like even like people, he was already like a name within the motion design community. And so I feel like, and I feel because the more tangible, like they know the struggles of being like, like a digital artist and like almost impossible to commercialize your work if you want to commercialize your work and have revenue from whatever digital work you're doing. The only way is either to, work for a company or doing freelance project and stuff. But like if you do your own, authentic or exploration with like digital art, they experience that. And I was like, oh, there's no way for me to get any revenue out of my art. I can do maybe prints or t-shirt or like, tutorials. There are like different ways that digital artists would try to generate some revenue out of it. But I think for them it was quite clear. Like, they see that, oh, that's solving an issue for us. Like we can now commercialize and be part of like the traditional art market.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah, I still feel like even on the art space, on the other like from like video production, like there's a lot of, I think most of the people are interested and curious, but there are always people that are just like, yo, that's complete bullshit.
Mm.
Which I mean, I understand why they feel like that. There's so much stuff happening in space. I can't like carry the
Mm.
flag of NFTs, like it's
It's
wonderful and
all good. It's
everything's amazing,
pure.
right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think I
Yeah.
agree because
Interesting.
I am like one of those where Guile just mentioned is artists who has problem in the traditional like prior to web 3 to try to make a full-time living as an artist. So when you have such struggle and you don't really see other alternatives in changing that, then blockchain becomes very interesting because there's the potential of you making your art career a lot more sustainable and practical. So I think a lot of artists came in for that. But I would also say like a lot of people who are hating on it are people who haven't spent, the first 20 hours learning about what blockchain is. They just read off the
Yeah.
headlines and people who haven't done put their own work in learning before, having a really, really strong opinion. I think that speaks more about those people than the actual subject. Um, yeah. And
Well
I
said.
think there's potential just also for architect. In terms of our architect, I just feel like if you spend some time and learn about metaverse and blockchain NFTs, I feel like as for architects, there's so much, creativity that you can now deploy on the blockchain and creating digital spaces where you could be like a hobby or a little side project or something where traditionally you can't because you're limited to the physics. And also for a lot of architects, you're working for the main architects within your agency. You're only doing their work. You can't even have your own designs.
Mm.
So I see it as an opportunity to have an outlet for your architect creativity to put together something very nice and creative, and you own it and it's your own, just as art projects. But then there's actual use cases as
Yeah.
NFTs, as people. There are platforms where you can create these 3D models and then launching them as NFTs, selling them, or letting other people use it in creating that metaverse for their brand or their personal use. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
I'm telling my architects.
I would say if you are an architect and you're exploring the metaverse, which I say go for it, one thing I would recommend is to really consider the design as part of a completely different universe with different physics. One thing I see in a lot of these metaverses is you see a house with walls and a roof. You have a wall to keep and the roof to keep out the weather. You need a wall to hold up a roof because there's gravity. These things don't exist in a metaverse. So from that that's one little thing I look at it, I get a little bit, annoyed at, and like a very, annoying, like I know I'm annoying when I kind of bring these things up, but it's if you're going to design things in a metaverse and you are an architect in the real world, just kind of consider the physics of a metaverse and kind of design accordingly. That's just one thing.
Yeah, I feel that there's so much opportunity for creativity, how to reimagine digital spaces. And I just wonder if like also like there's some like necessity to like ground a little bit on what we're used to, the same as like the early even today we still use the trash can on the computer representing the files that you don't want and you're going to delete it, and those like correlations with the real world. But yeah, there's it one thing that I noticed, yeah, how you move on those spaces sometimes, like I don't want to just walk all the way there. It takes so much time. Can I
Yeah,
just
what
like,
kind of
have some
transport or
other
something?
ways to move around? Yeah.
Yeah, all those are
Uh,
interesting.
it's a great topic. We should find someone who is in like the metaverse space or building digital spaces. That'd be cool. Because last time I remember in NFT BC, Julia, I don't know if you remember, but there were panel talks and someone was mentioning about the reasons of why people are creating white walls for galleries in the metaverse or the digital world. One potential reason is because it allows people who are so used to gaming or the digital world, the fantasy world, it gives them a sense of reality and separation, saying, hey, this is not just another game. This is a bit more serious, sort of, a bit more intended as an art gallery, as you would compare to a real world exhibition. I don't know. So there's like, I think depending on the target market, that also
Mm.
changes. I definitely see your point, and I think we need to find someone in the metaverse space
I would
now
love
to.
that one. Yeah, deep
Yeah.
dive on
I
that
would love to
topic.
hear an episode that you guys maybe bring two people, because I know I have heard that some architects are saying they're the best, or I mean, not the best, but like the most qualified professionals to build the metaverse. But then the game designers are being like, yo, we've been like, like developing digital spaces for decades now. So we are the most qualified.
Bring a
So
couple
maybe
of
get
people.
like
Yeah,
a,
yeah, good
yeah.
idea.
Thank you so much again, Guile, for joining us.
Oh, thank you guys for inviting. I mean, it was a pleasure chatting on MTVC. It was kind of quick, but I was really happy that we keep connected after, and we had that other chat the other day. It was really fun, and yeah, I was looking forward for today to have another chat with you guys. And I'm curious to keep following what you guys what kind of people in the new episodes you're gonna bring on the podcast. I'm really curious to follow that.
Yeah, I'm glad we had a quick chat in person. Like this would have kind of why I really want to start this podcast, because in the conferences and events in real life, you have like half a minute, 5 minutes with someone, but they have so much more to share. So doing this podcast allows us to like reconnect with some people that we met and say, hey, like let's sit down for half an hour, 1 hour to have a deep dive on what you're doing, get to know you, how we can help. Um, just I don't know, more building a support system of, and also just meeting friends. It's cool.